evening and welcome. We are the Inforunners. I'm Algared and I'm joined by my co-conspirator in crime and whatever else you want to call it, Execute. And today we want to look at the frustrations with Squadron 42. And we've been seeing it on come up in Spectrum. We've been seeing it in the chat. And if you watch Captain's Table, you probably also saw Execute have a frustration explosion recently. And I thought, hey, let's get a better idea. Execute. Tell us about your frustrations with Squadron 42.
I guess for me, it's kind of slowly has started to simmer. Now, I should probably go. I'm probably one of the longest running content creators of this game. I started doing it around 2013. I'm a Kickstarter backer from day one. And I don't say that to boast or anything. I just say that to show that I've been here for a long time and I've seen many different versions of frustration from people. And I personally think a lot of it is to do with 2020 and the pandemic. I think that has really shine a light on things. I think it's really given a lot more people free time, so they're a lot more bored, to say, not much less than that. But I have personally not ever been. I've been like annoyed and a little frustrated, but I've never been as frustrated as I am right now, and that worries me. And I already know several people this year that have backed out of the project. They've sold out their ships. They've sold their entire account. They've melted their ships, whatever method you want to pick. And they've got out for whether it be because they needed money or because they were just over the project. And I haven't seen that in this type of mass exodus type of thing in a while. And I've heard, I've just seen it on a few other shows this week. I know Salty Mike did a thing on the roadmap, and there was a few frustrated people on there, and I've seen a few other YouTubers just to put it in a small perspective. And I don't know. I think this episode's kind of like a little message to CIG that I hope they see it, and basically, I guess we're venting in a healthy manner. I kind of pass it off to you, Algared. Are you noticing it as well in the community? Like just and then I think we'll go through a few things. But yeah, are you frustrated more than you've been, or is it? How's your take on this year?
I'm certainly seeing and hearing and picking up a sense of frustration among members of the community. Certainly on Spectrum, I feel I'm seeing that. For me, one of the biggest frustrations is the now versus then, and part of that is also that sense that certainly as an older backer, not an original backer, but an older backer. I can remember when community engagement was actually community engagement, and where you felt you were actually part of a project, and now it feels like we are drifting more towards us and them, and CIG are just another version of EA.
Yeah, another corporate entity.
Horrific. That's a horrific statement to make, but in some ways that's what it feels like. And
agreed.
And it's a hard thing when the community has grown so much, but it's also another thing. And I know that there are members in the staff who feel that way as well, and that they miss that closeness of the old community, and that they're still torn by that. Well, how do we do that when the community is so big? And so it's not just a one-way streak of frustration. I think there's frustration on both sides, and I think you're right.
We're going to go over that in a bit too. So we are going to kind of break it down a little bit. I think we'll start off with a really obvious thing of where we are in 2020, and I think there's a few things to why it's building up. Obviously, I mentioned the pandemic. That's a really big thing. I think we're also nearing the end of the road. I think we are further along in Squadron 42 than most people realise. they're in crunch time. I think we can look at some things like the lack of concept sales to show that they're actually knuckling down and getting some work done.
When you look at the sales for this year, you also, and I think this is also pandemic related as well. This year is probably the biggest year
Yep.
financially they've had.
More people at home, more money to spend.
More people are buying ships. They're buying the base ships, and so because that income is coming in bucket loads like that, that's bigger than any year I can remember seeing, and I started in 2014. Um, and back then it was rolling over like millions a month. Now it's going. It seems quicker.
Maybe they're going, oh, well, that saves us doing less work. We don't have to do
And
as many
because
concepts.
there's people buying those starter ships and buying more packs, and they've got that income, they don't need to be selling off those concept ships to try and make sure they've got the funds to keep it going. So I think there's an element of that aspect coming into it as well. But I also think that's also freeing them up to get their crunch time. And I think you're right. I think we're getting close to that end of a road, and we're probably closer than a lot of us think.
Now, the other thing with this time of year, as you know, because this is our third time round doing this, is we're coming up to what would normally be as CitizenCon season. And because they only ever really talk about the PU, they seem to clamp down on news around this time. So they actually have things to talk about at CitizenCon. And we are coming into that period very quickly. You've basically got September, a bit of October, and we're there, you know. So
Yeah.
this is where the
So
news starts to...
we're in the quiet time.
Yep, it's as I've called it before, and you would have heard me say this: the calm before the storm. So we're getting all these things hit at once, and I think it's just bringing everything to a head, literally. And so I can understand why people are totally frustrated. You're at home, you're bored, lack of things on YouTube, lack of things on Netflix. Everyone's consuming everything as quickly as they possibly can. And there's nothing real new coming out. Very few new things coming. So I think, and you know, not many ship sales. So there's again not many things to talk about, and it's all bringing everything to a head. So
and I could see things like, even though we don't have ship sales, there are things that I know CIG could be doing that would build up that community engagement and feeling of community involvement. And like we've got the elections in game for the new Imperator, and yet, you know, when the last elections were on with where Senator Koss kind of got into power, you know, the Tavaran guy, we were actually having there were votes that we were making as community members, and you know, do we agree with this one? Do we agree with it? You know, the surveys we were doing, and they were actually having an impact upon the choices that were made. And I don't know whether it's because CIG wanted to go a certain path and they're fearful that the anarchists in the community will win out. Or whether they just haven't really worked out how they want to do that. But doing those types of questionnaires and quizzes and those things along with the campaign, they would certainly get people involved. And certainly that's the type of thing I enjoyed in the past when they were doing those types of things. So there is that element as well, and that seems to be missing. But
so let's talk about us and them for a bit. So from our perspective, it's pretty clear to, you know, kind of understand what we're kind of frustrated with, and I think we kind of went over a bit that with the, you know, what I'd call the cooking pot effect of 2020 and the time we're in. But from their point of view, they are still working really, really hard. And what is officially known as crunch time, sorry if I'm doing this too many times, but crunch time is a really busy time when you're a developer. You know, you're getting lots of deadlines and you're trying to get it all in and meet. Now, the other part of it is they don't really have to put things forward to a publisher, and they clearly don't report to us. So does that, like, I pose the question, does that make it a little bit more lax than, say, other development houses, or are they both running by the same metrics because they are financially, like, we know that they almost ran out of money and they had to go get that loan. Are they still under that, you know, that crunch? And we've also heard things in the past about how it can be a hard place to work because they're very, very demanding. I'm inclined to think they're still kind of going down that way. Like, you know, what are your thoughts in that regard? Do you think they're still pushing people fairly hard and working fairly hard?
I think the nature of a beast probably is they are, because you've got this ambitious project. It is,
Mm,
a lot of the things they're putting in are still pushing the boundaries quite heavily.
mm,
And so you've got that element where they know we can get this stuff done. It's just trying to crack how we're going to do it. And so
mm,
there is that pressure, if we can crack this, then we actually get X, Y, and Z. And so we've got X, Y, and Z kind of sitting in the wings. We just need this one done. So
mm.
come on, get cracking. So I think there's that element of aspect as well, and they
Yeah,
don't want to have to rewind on where they're looking at certain other things. So I think that has an impact.
yeah.
Um,
I think a big us and them thing for me is just really, and I've probably mentioned this before. I know I've mentioned it on Captain's Table. It's just
mm,
the lack of communication, not only with us but with their own developers, between each others, between different departments, stuff like that. I, I
yeah,
I find it really strange, and that's kind of going to lead on to our last point, which is, I don't know how else to phrase this, and you see how I've written it there in the notes, is Squadron 42, our investment in it, and no update. Um, I can understand their hesitance, I can't pronounce that word, but their resistance to giving us a date,
yeah.
because they've given us dates in the past, like the last one I think was 2017, and we're way past that.
And people just burn them for it, right? They say,
Yep,
hey, look, this is where we're aiming at.
they've
We
learned
know that
they've
with
learned
development,
from certain bad people's behavior, but they've got to also realize that most of us are just sitting here quite diligently, and we're adults. And if you say, oh, we're hoping to be here within 12 months, we're cool. And if they went and said, well, we're hoping to be in 12 months, but it might be 2 years, if they told us that, that'd be fine too. I'd be cool with that too, as long as they just keep us updated. I think they've, like, it's the same thing with the, like, it feels like that a little bit at the moment with the roadmap and the frustrations that people are having about that. They are trying to do the right thing, but they're now worried how it appears.
and so it's now got to be perfect before we can show it on. And because
Yep.
when we've moved things out, people having a
Fit.
seizure and
Yep.
claiming you're changing the ball game, and yet even from the beginning, my understanding of a roadmap is, look, this is where we're hoping to be. Yet
Exactly.
things are going to
Best
change as it
guess.
goes along, and it's not going to be standard, and things are
Mm.
going to get pulled off and ripped out. And but
And
this is our best guess.
they have all those caveats there, but
No,
people
of
just don't
course,
take
no,
them that
no,
way.
it's on the roadmap, but I don't care about your caveats. You said you were going to have it done. Where is
Yeah,
it?
and
And
unfortunately, look, I think you can say this, and I don't know how to say this politely. Some people are stupid, and they don't read everything, and they jump the
it
gun
just
and make assumptions.
you say some people are stupid and don't read everything and just make assumptions. That's
Yes,
exactly what you say.
yeah, well, but that's it
Um,
though. They do that, and unfortunately, you've just got to ignore those people. But the problem is that it's people like media organizations that really blow it out of proportions because they're
yeah.
clickbait and they need clicks to survive. There's no news like bad news. But
But I think there is a real element of our investment and no update. It really
yes,
comes again. It comes back to the us and them. Like
well,
we're looking at it as we're not getting any info from them.
mm,
They're looking at it and saying we're still giving a lot of info out.
mm,
But I think there's a disconnect that the information that we're getting is not the information that we're wanting to know.
yeah,
And and on top of that, we've got that lack of personal feel,
yep.
that
Well,
lack of community feel.
it goes a little
And
bit deeper than that too because we're essentially buying ships for when we go above the basic package, and when you go
yeah,
into Star Citizen, those ships that we are, you can call them pledges. I'm calling them purchasing because that's what they are. Purchasing a ship, it's not for that game that it's funding. It's funding Squadron 42, but I want it for Star Citizen, and see that's really
yeah,
disconnected as well in my like and not in a good way in my book. Like
yeah.
I'm
Look, I know when I backed the game, I was backing for Squadron 42.
yeah,
So most of what I put in was for backing Squadron 42. The PU was an added bonus.
yeah,
Sweet, I've got I'm backing Squadron 42. I've got this awesome game with all these stars and everyone else, and I get to play. I get to continue play in the PU as well, and so that's an element that's always been there. But and that's something that we've got to come to grips with. We've got to understand it, and I think CIG. I'm pretty certain that they're very aware that what we're doing is we've paid. We are basically their publisher.
Yeah, and Brian Chambers has said he felt that himself back in the past, and I tend to agree with him. And I guess where I'd wrap this up, and I'll say my last part, and then you can say whatever you want to say, is I was very frustrated, and I did vent on the captain's table, and I was very tired at the time, because normally I keep some of that stuff to myself, but I am still frustrated, but it all stems from just that lack of information. If they, if they treated us like adults and not like children, unfortunately, there's always some immature people in life. That's just how it is. You have to play the adult, and we need to know that information. Well, I don't know if we need to know it, but it would definitely, it's kind of like the pressure valve. It would let off the pressure valve quite a bit if we just had a rough idea of how long we're waiting. And again, I think it's because of everyone being locked inside and frustrated. We're just a little bit, when it's hot and you get more angry when it's hot, it's like that. It's because we're locked inside and we're naturally already frustrated. I think we're just more frustrated again.
I think, and picking up what you're saying, I actually think really the big problem is that sense of lack of community engagement. And I think the big issue there is the fact that the community has grown so much.
Yep.
The problem CIG have got is how do we do that community engagement at the same level it used to be and that everyone found so lovely when we're so much bigger and the community is so much bigger. How do we balance that and how do we, and I think they're struggling with that whole aspect as well.
Well, we've definitely talked in the past about a few things that they could do differently. I think they, maybe even dropping a bit of their production quality if that's the thing. But I think they definitely need to take some more people on board. I think some of their people are definitely overworked.
Look, I think part of the problem in terms of the community engagement stuff is and I think we've said it on a show before, is we've now only got really one face.
Yep.
Now, I actually found the last few episodes of the Inside Star Citizen type show they've been doing actually refreshing because we've got other creators actually starting off a show and talking about what they're doing. We don't have Disco necessarily introducing it. And it's not. I'm not bagging Disco out in this regard. It's just that I was tired of seeing Disco.
Yeah.
I don't want to see Disco every show, every episode, and he's not just Star Citizen. And for me, that's just a frustration. I want to see Sandy. I want to see Chris. I want to see Brian. I want to see Tony. I want to see the guy who's making the little greeballs on the plants or whatever, and him telling us what they're doing. I also want to see Disco and see what he says. But there's that element. Whereas when you condensed it so you could get things done, you also, when you've got one staff member only, you being your main presenter, it gives that sense of there's no community and no engagement, and that becomes cyclical and just keeps growing and making things worse. And so I think that's part of the problem as well, is how do we do it? How do we balance things out? And I think CIG are struggling with having those same frustrations we're having in terms of communication and engagement.
So let us know in the comments. What are you frustrated with in regards to Star Citizen and I guess Squadron 40? I was going to say Squadron 42 and Star Citizen, but sort of backwards. But yeah, let us know your thoughts in the comments. And do you think it is kind of a cooking pot situation where there's a few things coming to a head at the moment? And would that, like, just knowing how far away that you've got to wait, would that abate it enough for you? Because for me, it would. Anything else you would like to hear from people, Algared, in the comments?
I think knowing what you're frustrated about.
Yeah, that's
what are your hopes? What are actually your hopes? Rather than
some positive rather
looking
than
at the
some
bad
negative.
things.
Yeah.
Rather than looking at the negatives and saying what's wrong, what are the things you're looking forward to?
Mm,
You know, count
that's
your
a good
blessings,
point.
count them one by one.
Yeah.
You know, so look at the good things, not necessarily the bad things. And I think sometimes when we're struggling with those frustrations and that angst and that worry, sometimes we've got to shift focus and say, okay, what are the
Yeah.
good things we've got?
Yeah,
And
that's true.
focus on those, and then those frustrations disappear a little. And I think that might be part of what we've got to do as well.
Agreed.
So yeah,
Mm.
so that's probably my parting thought. But tell us what you think.
Sign us out, Algared.
All right. So if you've liked what we do on Inforunners, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to ring our bell. We love to make sure you get
Can't ring
notified
the
of
bell
what's going
anymore.
on.
Can't ring the
Oh,
bell
I do?
anymore. They changed it,
Okay.
man. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
man. See,
unringable.
I'm a bit behind. Okay,
Yeah,
we're
it's all good.
unringable anymore.
Yeah.
But no, make sure you subscribe. Put your comments in. We love seeing your comments. We read every comment. We don't always respond to every comment, but I think we've responded to quite a few.
We do.
Join us on Discord. We love having the engagement and interaction with you guys on Discord as well. And if you want to go that extra mile, consider being a Patreon and supporting us and helping us improve the quality, not only of our show, but also of everything else that we do. And on that note, I've been Algared.
I've been
That's been the
executed.
Hairy Execute, and we're out of here. Take care, God bless, and be well.
See you guys next time.